Hello there. Let's talk about those Southern Baptists. The Southern Baptists are having their annual convention right now in Indianapolis, and they've made the news with a couple of decisions that they have made that I want to speak about briefly. One is last year they passed a change to their bylaws that said that any church with a senior pastor who was a female was automatically kicked out of the Southern Baptist denomination. But because it was a change, it had to be approved a second time, a second convention, so it had to be approved this summer, and it failed, surprisingly. There were some people who stood up and said, we already have mechanisms in place to deal with individual churches. We don't need to do a blanket thing like this. But it was interesting to me that it failed. I think, and this is just me thinking, that perhaps they looked at the reaction to the Roe v. Wade decision and how that has sort of turned into the dog that caught the car. And I'm wondering if they're thinking, we don't really need to take this step. We can do it individually and not make all this noise and all this news. The interesting thing is that Southern Baptists are perfectly happy to have women serve in all sorts of ways. Children's minister, youth minister, music minister, work in the nursery, whatever. But no, can't be the senior pastor, can't be the one in charge. And that seems to be the issue. We can't let the women be in charge. Now, before you start coming after me about the fact that, you just don't understand, let me make something plain. I grew up a Southern Baptist. I was a Southern Baptist for many, many, many years, maybe decades. And so I have been in that space and I understand their thinking. I just disagree with it vehemently at this point. But they didn't do that. So they didn't pass that law and they still have to go church by church if they want to get rid of churches who have women in senior pastor roles. But then they turned around and they condemned in vitro fertilization. Now, again, if you understand most of the position on abortion, which is life begins at conception, you can sort of understand why they would do that. But I'm just wondering how many women were sitting there in that auditorium, in that convention center thinking, wait a minute, I had a baby through IVF. One of our children is from IVF. All of our children are from IVF. So am I now a sinner in their eyes? Have I done something really bad? And of course, in some churches, it might turn into, I get to go to heaven. One of the things that is so frustrating about dealing with some religious people is that they believe that their understanding of certain parts of God's word should be made into law and should apply to everyone. And I understand that in some regards. But to say that women can't lead a church, which is patriarchal, hierarchical, all those arcles that you want to talk about, and then to turn around and say that IVF is a sinful thing and is bad and bad for society and whatever, just shows that they are majoring on the minors. I didn't see any resolutions passed about the hungry or the sick or the homeless or any of those issues that you would think that people who call themselves Christians will be concerned about. But no, they're concerned about keeping women in their place. And by the way, we want them to be having babies, but not using IVF. I'm no longer a Southern Baptist, and this is one of the reasons why. Their inability to see the real needs of the world and instead to focus on these issues is why I left that denomination, and why many people are leaving that denomination. I hope that some of the Southern Baptists who are still there will stand up and say, these are bad ideas. We need to change our minds. We need to not do this. And perhaps at some point they will. In the meantime, there will be more people like me who will look at these decisions and say, nope, I can't be a part of this any longer.